Chapter 1. The Ghost of Blackwood Village. The bell above the apothecary door chimed. It was a bright, cheerful sound that signaled the arrival of someone who mattered. Rory did not look up from the mortar and pestle. She kept her head bowed. Her hands worked in a steady rhythm. Grind, crush, twist. The scent of dried sage and bitter root coated her skin like a second layer of clothing. It was the perfume of the invisible. Mrs. Gable bustled past the counter. Her skirts swished against the floorboards. The older woman didn't even glance at the girl in the corner. People in Blackwood Village had a special talent. They could look right through Rory as if she were made of window glass. 3 tinctures for the Alpha's household, Mrs. Gable announced to the empty air. She knew Rory was listening. Servants were furniture. And be quick about it. The pack is restless tonight. Rory stopped grinding. Her fingers were stained green. Restless meant dangerous. When the wolves were agitated, the humans stayed indoors. She reached for the amber vials on the shelf. Her hand trembled. Just a little. Did you hear me, girl? Yes, ma'am, Rory whispered. Her voice was rusty. She used it so rarely that it felt foreign in her throat. She packed the crate with care. Glass clinked against glass. Outside, the autumn wind howled. It rattled the window panes. The sun was dipping below the horizon. Shadows stretched across the wooden floor. They looked like claws reaching for her ankles. Rory slipped out the back door. The cold air bit her cheeks. It was a sharp, stinging greeting. She pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. It offered little protection against the coming freeze. Nothing she owned offered protection. The village square was emptying. Shopkeepers were locking their doors. Mothers were ushering children inside. Everyone had a place to go. Everyone had a pack. A family. A home that wanted them. Rory walked toward the edge of the forest. Her cottage, if one could call a rotting shack a cottage, sat alone. It was banished to the tree line. Just like her. They called her the traitor's daughter. It didn't matter that she had been 5 years old when her mother was exiled. Sins of the parent-stained child. That was the law of the wolf. She kept her eyes on her boots. Mud splashed the worn leather. If she didn't look up, she couldn't see the sneers. If she didn't make eye contact, she wasn't real. A group of young shifters loitered near the tavern. Their laughter was loud, boisterous. One of them, a boy with hair the color of sand, shoved his friend. The friend stumbled into Rory's path. She froze. Watch it, Mouse, the boy snarled. He didn't apologize. He looked at her with pure disgust. Sorry, Rory breathed. She stepped into the mud to go around him. Don't touch her, the other boy laughed. It was a cruel sound. You might catch the bad luck. Rory walked faster. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird in a cage of bone. She didn't cry. Tears were a luxury. She used them up years ago. She just wanted to reach the trees. The forest didn't care about her bloodline. The forest didn't care that she was broken. She reached the canopy of ancient pines. The darkness swallowed her. Finally, she could breathe. But the hair on her arm stood up. The silence here was heavy. It was watching her. Something was different tonight. The air tasted like ozone and iron. Rory stopped. She clutched the crate of medicine to her chest. A twig snapped. Not from beneath her foot. From behind her. She wasn't alone. Chapter 2. Golden Eyes in the Dark. Fear was a familiar coat. Rory wore it every day. But this fear was different. It wasn't the dull anxiety of avoiding angry villagers. This was primal. It sat at the base of her spine and screamed. She turned slowly. The forest was a wall of gray trunks and black shadows. Hello, she called out. No answer. Just the wind sighing through the pine needles. Rory gripped the wooden crate until her knuckles turned white. Her mind drifted. It pulled her backward. Past the fear. Past the loneliness. Back to the one day she had felt useful. She was 8 years old. The winter had been harsh that year. Snow piled in drifts deeper than she was tall. She had been searching for firewood. Her fingers were numb in her mittens. Then she heard it. A whimper. She found the wolf caught in a poacher's trap. It was massive. Even then, she knew it wasn't a normal animal. Its fur was ink black, a void in the white snow. The iron teeth of the trap were buried deep in its hind leg. Blood stained the ice. Bright red poppies blooming in winter. Most children would have run. A wounded wolf was a killing machine. Little Rory didn't run. She saw the pain in the creature's posture. She recognized it. She felt that same pain every time a village kid threw a stone at her. She dropped her firewood. She crawled toward the beast. The wolf snarled. It bared teeth that looked like daggers. "It's okay," she whispered. "I won't hurt you." She wasn't strong enough to pry the trap open. Not with her hands. She found a sturdy branch. She used it as a lever. She pushed with everything she had. She gritted her teeth. She cried from the effort. The metal groaned. The jaws of the trap loosened. Just an inch. The wolf yanked its leg free. Rory fell back into the snow. She waited to be eaten. She waited for the bite. But the wolf didn't attack. It limped toward her. It lowered its massive head. Its eyes locked onto hers. They were gold. Not yellow. Not amber. Pure, molten gold. They burned with an intelligence that frightened her. They burned with something else too. Gratitude. The great beast licked her cheek. Once. Oranif, vetchant poperkish. Then it vanished into the white blur of the storm. Rory blinked. The memory faded. She was 20 years old again, standing in the darkening woods. The snow was gone. The ground was covered in dead leaves. But the feeling remained. That moment of connection. For 10 seconds of her life, she had been seen. She had been chosen. A low huff of breath came from the brush to her left. Rory's head snapped toward the sound. 2 lights appeared in the gloom. They floated 6 feet off the ground. They were not lanterns. They were eyes. Molten gold. The air left her lungs. It wasn't possible. It had been 12 years. Wolves didn't live that long in the wild. Not wounded ones. "Is that you?" she whispered. The question hung in the air. The eyes blinked. The creature stepped forward. A massive paw hit the earth. Silent. Heavy. It was a wolf. But it was wrong. It was too big. It stood as tall as a horse at the shoulder. Its fur was matted with burrs and dried mud. It looked like a king who had been dragged through a war. Rory's instincts screamed run. Her soul whispered stay. She took a step backward. Her heel caught on an exposed root. Chapter 3. The Scent of Fate. Gravity was a cruel mistress. Rory flailed. Her arms windmilled. The crate of medicines flew from her grasp. She hit the ground hard. Her palm slammed onto a jagged rock. Pain shot up her arm. It was a sharp, hot spike. "Ah," she gasped. The crate landed a few feet away. Glass shattered. The smell of antiseptic and herbs exploded into the air. But beneath that sharp chemical tang, there was something else. Copper. Sweet and metallic. Rory sat up. She cradled her hand. A slice ran diagonally across her palm. Blood welled up. It was dark and rich. It dripped onto the dry leaves. Drip. Drip. The forest went absolutely silent. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. Even the crickets ceased their chirping. The massive black wolf froze. He stood 10 yards away. His body went rigid. Every muscle coiled tight beneath that black pelt. His nostrils flared. He inhaled, a deep, shuddering breath that seemed to rattle his ribcage. Rory clutched her bleeding hand to her chest. "Stay back," she warned. Her voice trembled. This was not the gentle memory from her childhood. This was a predator smelling a meal. The wolf did not stay back. He took a step, then another. His movements were jerky, like he was fighting his own limbs. He lowered his head. A low sound started in his chest. It wasn't a growl. It was a vibration. It hummed through the ground and into Rory's bones. It sounded like need. Rory scrambled backward on her heels. Leaves crunched under her panic. "Please," she begged. The wolf's eyes were locked on her bleeding hand. The gold irises seemed to glow brighter. They swirled with madness, with hunger. He lunged. Rory squeezed her eyes shut. She threw her good arm up to protect her face. She waited for the teeth. She waited for the end. It didn't come. Instead, hot breath washed over her face. The smell of rain and pine and wild musk filled her nose. It was intoxicating. It made her head spin. She opened one eye. The wolf was inches from her. He wasn't looking at her throat. He was looking at her eyes. He sniffed her neck. He inhaled deeply right over her pulse point. Rory stopped breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard it hurt. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. The wolf let out a soft whine. It was a sound of pure agony. Suddenly, a howl ripped through the distance. It was far away, but getting closer. Other wolves. Rogues. The black wolf snapped his head up. His ears swiveled. The golden obsession in his eyes vanished, replaced by cold, lethal calculation. He looked back at Rory. He looked at her bleeding hand. He growled. This time it was a command. Get up. Rory didn't understand wolf speak, but she understood danger. She scrambled to her feet. Her knees knocked together. The wolf didn't retreat. He circled her. He placed his massive body between her and the direction of the distant howl. He bared his teeth at the empty forest. He was protecting her. Rory watched the black fur on his back stand up. A strange heat started to bloom in her chest. It radiated from her core. It felt like a fever. It pulsed in time with the wolf's breathing. Why did she feel safer with a monster than she did in her own village? The wolf turned his head. He looked at her one last time. There was a plea in those golden depths. Run. And for the first time in her life, Rory listened to her gut instead of her fear. She turned and ran toward the lights of her shack. She didn't look back, but she could feel his eyes on her spine, burning, branding, claiming. She was no longer invisible. She had been seen by the dark, and the dark was hungry. Chapter 4. The Teeth in the Dark. Rory ran until her lungs burned like fire. The forest was a blur of shadows and sharp branches. Every tree looked like a monster. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. She did not look back. She knew the golden-eyed wolf was gone. She also knew something else was out there. Something worse. The wind shifted. A new smell hit her nose. It was not the clean scent of pine or rain. It smelled like old meat. It smelled like rot. Rory skidded to a stop. A low growl rumbled from the darkness ahead. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Two wolves stepped onto the path. They were not majestic like the black wolf. These creatures were nightmares. Their fur was patchy and gray. Scars crisscrossed their muzzles. Saliva dripped from their jaws. Rogues. Wolves with no pack and no honor. Rory took a step back. Her boot hit a root. She stumbled. The larger rogue lunged. He moved faster than thought. Rory threw her arms up. She screamed. She expected teeth to tear in her throat. She expected to die alone in the dirt. A black thunderbolt crashed into the rogue. The impact shook the ground. Rory fell hard. She scrambled backward. She pressed her spine against a tree trunk. The massive black wolf stood over her. He was a wall of muscle and fur. He roared. The sound was not animal. It was the sound of a king defending his throne. The rogue struggled to get up. The black wolf did not let him. He snapped his jaws. Bone crunched. The rogue went limp. The second enemy circled them. He was smaller but faster. He dove for Rory's exposed leg. The black wolf spun around. He took the bite meant for her. Teeth sank into his shoulder. Blood sprayed. It was dark and hot. It splattered onto Rory's cheek. He did not whimper. He did not falter. He ripped the second rogue away and threw him into a tree. The creature hit the wood with a sickening crack and did not move again. Silence fell over the forest. Rory trembled. She could not stop shaking. Her breath came in short gasps. She looked up at her savior. The black wolf stood swaying. Blood matted the fur on his shoulder. He breathed heavy, wet breaths. He turned his massive head toward her. The golden eyes were dim now. They were full of pain. He took one step toward her. Then his legs gave out. He collapsed. Rory gasped. She should run. This was her chance. He was down, but she could not move. She stared at the beast who had bled for her. No one had ever bled for her. The air around the wolf began to shimmer. It looked like heat rising from pavement. The black fur started to recede. Bones cracked and reshaped. The snout shortened. The claws retracted. He was shifting. Rory watched in horror and awe. The monster melted away. In its place lay a man. He was naked. He was covered in scars. He was unconscious. Rory stared at his face. Even covered in dirt and blood, he was beautiful. He had a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. His hair was the color of a raven's wing. She reached out a hand. She did not know why. She just wanted to make sure he was real. The moment her fingertips brushed his skin, a shock wave hit her. It felt like lightning. The world tilted on its axis. Darkness rushed in from the edges of her vision. "Safe," she whispered. Then she slumped forward and knew no more. Chapter 5. The Man in the Firelight. Warmth. That was the first thing Rory felt. It was not the cold bite of the forest floor. It was soft. It smelled like cedar wood and clean linen. She opened her eyes. She was lying on a bed. It was huge. The sheets were thick wool. Above her, wooden beams crossed the ceiling. Firelight danced on the walls. It cast long, flickering orange shadows. She sat up. Her head spun. "Where is she?" "You are awake." The voice came from the corner. It was deep. It sounded like gravel wrapped in velvet. Rory pulled the blanket up to her chin. She looked toward the fireplace. A man sat in a wooden chair. He was leaning forward. His elbows rested on his knees. It was him, the wolf. He wore loose trousers, but no shirt. A bandage was wrapped around his shoulder. White linen stained with fresh red. The firelight played across his chest. He was made of hard lines and lean muscle. He looked like a statue carved by a lonely god. Rory swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately. He just watched her. His eyes were the same molten gold as the wolf. They burned. They stripped her bare. "I am Kale," he said finally. The name landed in the room like a stone in a pond. Kale. It sounded ancient. Rory scooted back against the headboard. "You saved me." "Why?" Kale stood up. He moved with a predator's grace. Silent. Lethal. He walked toward the bed. Every step he took sent a strange pulse through Rory's body. It was a magnetic pull, a tug in her chest that told her to get closer. "I did not have a choice," Kale said. He stopped at the foot of the bed. "My wolf would not let you die." Rory frowned. "Because I helped you? When I was a child." Kale's expression darkened. A shadow passed over his face. He looked away, toward the fire. "You remember." "I never forgot," Rory said softly. "Everyone forgets me. But I never forgot you." Kale's head snapped back to her. His jaw tightened. He gripped the wooden bedpost. The wood creaked under his hand. "You should have forgotten," he said. His voice was rough. "I am dangerous, Rory. Being near me is a death sentence." Rory blinked. He knew her name. How did he know her name? "Who are you really?" she asked. "Wolves don't turn into men like you. Not regular wolves." Kale looked at her. The intensity in his gaze made her skin prickle. He stepped closer. He leaned in. The smell of him hit her full force. Zen, pine, and something spicy and masculine. It made her mouth water. It made her want to lean forward and press her nose against his neck. She was an omega. She was the lowest of the low. She had no wolf of her own. She should not feel this pull. This was for fated mates. This was for the powerful. "I'm the reason the storms come," Kale whispered. "I'm a monster mothers warn their children about." He reached out. His hand hovered near her face. He looked like he wanted to touch her cheek. His fingers trembled. "You need to leave," he said. But his eyes said stay. Chapter 6. The Invisible Chain. Rory scrambled out of the bed. The floorboards were cold under her bare feet. She was still wearing her dress, but it was torn and muddy. "You're right," she said. Her voice was high and breathless. "I should go. The village will be looking for me." That was a lie. No one was looking for her, but she needed to escape. The air in the cabin was too thick. It was charged with electricity. Being this close to Kale felt like standing next to a bonfire. It was warm, but she knew it would burn her. Kale did not move to stop her. He stood by the bed. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He looked like he was in pain. Rory rushed to the heavy wooden door. She grabbed the iron handle. She pulled it open. Cold night air rushed in. Freedom. She took one step onto the porch. A sharp pain exploded in her chest. "Gah!" Rory doubled over. It felt like an invisible hook had snagged her heart and yanked it backward. She gasped for air. Her knees buckled. Behind her, she heard a heavy thud. Rory turned her head. Kale was on his knees. He was gripping his chest right over his heart. His face was pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "What is this?" Rory cried. The pain was unbearable. It was a physical ache, a hollowness that felt like dying. "Come back inside," Kale gritted out. His voice was strained. "Now." Rory crawled back across the threshold. She didn't want to, but her body forced her. The moment she crossed back into the room, the pain vanished. It was instant. 1 second she was dying, the next she could breathe again. Kale took a deep breath. He stayed on the floor for a moment, recovering. Then he looked up at her. His golden eyes were terrified. Rory slammed the door shut. She backed away until she hit the wall. "What did you do to me?" she demanded. "Is this a spell?" Kale slowly stood up. He leaned against the heavy table in the center of the room. He looked defeated. The powerful Alpha looked trapped. "It is not a spell," he said. "It is a curse. Your curse." "Ours," he corrected. Rory shook her head. "I don't understand. I am just an apothecary girl. I am nobody." Kale laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You are not nobody to the fates, and you are certainly not nobody to my wolf." He walked toward her. This time, he didn't stop until he was inches away. The heat coming off him was intoxicating. The pull in her chest purred with contentment. It wanted him close. "The bond has snapped into place," Kale explained. He looked down at her with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "Because I saved you. Because you saved me. We are tied." Rory looked at the door, then back at him. "So I can't leave? If we separate," Kale said, his voice low and grave, "the bond tears. It will kill us both." Rory felt the blood drain from her face. She was trapped. Trapped with a stranger. Trapped with a monster. "For how long?" she whispered. Kale reached out. This time, he didn't stop. He tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was fire. "Until I figure out how to break it," he said. "Or until it kills us." Rory looked into his eyes. She saw the truth there. She was no longer the invisible girl. She was the prisoner of a prince. And God help her, she didn't want to run anymore. Chapter 7. The Crown of Scars. Dawn broke with the color of a bruised peach. Light filtered through the grime on the cabin windows. It illuminated dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. Rory sat on a wooden stool. She held a bowl of hot water and a clean rag. Kale sat on the edge of the mattress. His back was to her. The muscles of his shoulders bunched and released with every breath. He looked like a map of violence. Scars crisscrossed his skin. Some were old and white. Others were pink and jagged. They told a story of a life spent in the jaws of death. "Hold still," Rory commanded. Her voice was firmer today. Necessity had stiffened her spine. She pressed the warm cloth to the wound on his shoulder. The bite from the rogue was deep. It oozed dark blood mixed with a black, tar-like substance. "Poison," Kale hissed. His hands gripped the edge of the bed so hard the wood groaned. "It stings." "It is supposed to sting," Rory replied. She rinsed the rag. The water turned pink. "Infection is setting in. My herds are gone. I need to find willow bark." "No, Gael Rambil." He turned his head slightly. His profile was sharp against the morning light. "You do not leave this cabin. Ryden has spies everywhere. If they smell you, they find me." Rory paused. Her hand hovered over his skin. "Who is Ryden?" Kale went very still. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. He turned fully to face her. His golden eyes were voids of ancient regret. "Ryden is my brother," he said. The words were heavy stones. "He is the one who sits on the obsidian throne, and he is the reason I am here." Rory's heart skipped a beat. She knew the stories. Everyone in the kingdom knew the stories. The old king had been murdered 5 years ago. His eldest son, Ryden, claimed the younger son had gone mad and torn out their father's throat. "You are Prince Kalen," she breathed. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was trapped in a cabin with the Kingslayer, the usurper, the mad wolf. "I did not kill him," Kale said. His voice was devoid of emotion. That made it more terrifying. Ryden wanted the crown. He wanted the power. I was in his way. So he killed our father and framed me. He branded me with this curse. He touched the black veins spreading from the bite mark. "The curse ensures I am always hunted," he continued. "It draws enemies to me. It makes me weak when I should be strong. And it ensures that anyone I love dies." Rory looked at the wound. It wasn't just an injury. It was a chain. "That is why you push me away," she realized. "Because you think you will kill me." "I know I will," Kale corrected. He looked at her with a devastating intensity. "I am death, Rory. I am a forest fire. You are a paper moth." Rory did not flinch. She reached out. She placed her hand directly over his heart. She could feel the heavy, rhythmic thud beneath his skin. It was strong. It was alive. "I'm not a moth," she whispered. "I'm the girl who opened the trap. Remember?" Kale stared at her hand on his chest. His expression fractured. For a second, the monster was gone. Only a lonely man remained. Chapter 8. Gravity and Gunpowder. The afternoon stretched out like lazy honey. Time felt different in the cabin. It was suspended. The world outside, The village, the gossip, the cold, felt like a nightmare they had both woken up from. Rory stood at the small stove. She stirred a pot of broth. It was thin soup made from dried venison Cale had in his stores, but it smelled like heaven. Cale sat at the table. He was sharpening a long, serrated dagger. Shhh-gay, shhh-gay. The rhythmic sound was hypnotic. He watched her. Rory could feel his gaze on her back. It was a physical weight. It was heat. She turned around. She caught him staring. He did not look away. He did not apologize. He looked at her with a hunger that had nothing to do with the soup. "You are staring," she said. She tried to keep her voice light. It came out breathless. "I am memorizing," Cale replied. He set the knife down. "I have spent 5 years in the dark. I had forgotten what light looked like." Rory blushed. Heat flooded her cheeks. She was not used to compliments. She was used to insults. She was used to being the background character in everyone else's life. She walked to the table. She set a bowl in front of him. "Eat. You need your strength." Cale reached for the spoon. His hand brushed hers. Snap! A spark of static electricity jumped between them. It was loud in the quiet room. Rory gasped. She pulled her hand back, but Cale was faster. He caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but firm. His skin was rough with calluses. Hers was soft. The contrast was electric. "Do you feel that?" he asked. His voice dropped an octave. It was a low rumble that vibrated in her bones. "Stativ," Rory lied. "It is just the dry air." "Liar," Cale whispered. He pulled her closer. She stumbled forward. She ended up standing between his spread knees. The air became thick. It became hard to breathe. The scent of him, musk and rain, filled her senses. The bond in her chest purred. It was a satisfied cat stretching in the sun. Cale looked up at her. His golden eyes were swirling. The pupils were blown wide. "It is the bond," he said. "It demands proximity. It demands skin." He lifted her hand. He turned it over. He pressed a kiss to the center of her palm, right over the cut she had gotten in the woods. Rory's knees went weak. A jolt of pure pleasure shot up her arm. It settled low in her belly. It was a heavy, aching heat. "Cale," she breathed. It was a warning. It was an invitation. He looked at her mouth. He leaned in. His lips were inches from hers. She could feel his breath. She closed her eyes. She tilted her head. She wanted this. She wanted to be consumed. Suddenly, Cale stiffened. He released her wrist. He pushed her back. Not gently. Rory stumbled. She opened her eyes. "What?" Cale was standing. He was already moving toward the window. He grabbed the knife from the table. His body was rigid. The lover was gone. The soldier was back. "Get down," he ordered. Chapter 9. The Burning of the Sanctuary. Silence is often heavier than noise. The forest outside had gone completely quiet. No birds. No wind. It was the silence of a held breath before a scream. Rory crouched behind the heavy oak table. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "What is it?" she whispered. "Scouts," Cale hissed. He peeked through a crack in the shutter. "Ryden's elite guard. They found us." Glass shattered. Something heavy and flaming crashed through the front window. It was a bottle filled with pitch and oil. It smashed against the far wall. Liquid fire splashed across the dry logs. The cabin ignited instantly. Flames roared up the curtains. Smoke, black and choking, filled the room. "Move!" Cale roared. He grabbed Rory's arm. He yanked her toward the back door. The heat was already intense. It seared the skin on her face. The roar of the fire sounded like a living beast devouring their sanctuary. Cale kicked the back door open. 3 men stood in the yard. They wore leather armor, dyed the color of dried blood. They held crossbows. "The prince," one shouted. "Take the shot." Thwip! A bolt flew through the air. Kyle spoon. He shoved Rory behind him. He caught the bolt with his bare hand. The metal tip stopped inches from his chest. He snarled. A deep, guttural sound that belonged to the wolf, not the man. He didn't shift. There was no time. He threw the bolt back with terrifying force. It struck the lead scout in the throat. The man gurgled and fell. "Run for the tree line," Cale commanded. He threw himself at the other 2 guards. He was a blur of violence. He fought with a savage grace. He broke an arm. He shattered a knee. He was buying her time. Rory ran. Her boots slipped on the frost-covered grass. She reached the edge of the woods. She turned back. The cabin was a torch. It illuminated the clearing in stark, flickering orange light. Cale stood over the fallen guards. His chest heaved. Blood, not his own, coated his hands. More shouts came from the main road. Reinforcements. Cale turned and sprinted toward her. He grabbed her hand. He didn't stop. He pulled her into the darkness of the trees. They will track us, Rory gasped. She struggled to keep up with his long strides. They have wolves. We have the night, Cale replied grimly. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the path ahead. And we have each other. They ran until the glow of the fire faded behind them. They ran until Rory's legs felt like lead. But the image of the burning cabin stayed, burned into her mind. The safety was gone. The domestic dream was ash. Rory looked at Cale's profile in the moonlight. He looked hard, unforgiving. He was the Prince of Ruins, but his hand was warm in hers. And for the first time in her life, Rory realized that safety wasn't a place. It wasn't a cabin. Safety was the man holding her hand, and she would burn the whole world down to keep him. Chapter 10, The Altar of Dust. The chapel stood like a hollowed-out ribcage against the moon. It was an ancient ruin of stone and stained glass that time had forgotten. The heavy oak doors groaned as Cale pushed them open. Dust motes danced in the sliver of moonlight that cut through the darkness. It smelled of old wax and damp stone. It smelled like secrets. Rory shivered. Her dress was damp from the run. The cold air of the sanctuary bit through the thin fabric. Here, Cale rasped. He pointed to a sheltered corner behind the crumbled altar. We stop here. My leg will not carry me further. He slumped against a stone pillar. His face was the color of ash. The black veins from the rogue bite had spread. They climbed up his neck like ivy made of ink. The curse was feeding. Rory knelt beside him. She tore a strip from the hem of her skirt. Her hands were steady now. Fear had burned away into focus. She was no longer the mouse of Blackwood Village. She was the only thing standing between a prince and the grave. Let me see, she commanded. Cale hissed as she peeled back the blood-soaked linen. The wound pulsed with a sickly green light. It was not just flesh that was damaged. The magic was eating his soul. You should leave me, Cale groaned. His head lolled back against the stone. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. Ryden's hunters will check the roads first. You can slip away through the valley. Rory dipped the cloth into a font of stagnant, holy water nearby. She pressed it to his burning skin. Be quiet. I'm not going anywhere. Cale opened his eyes. The gold was dim, eclipsed by the pain. He looked at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. Why? I have brought you nothing but fire and danger. Because you came back, Rory said simply. She traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. The contact sent a jolt of warmth through them both. It was a lifeline. The curse receded just a fraction under her touch. Cale leaned into her hand. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the hardened warrior vanished. He was just a man seeking comfort in the storm. You act as if you were worth nothing, Cale whispered. His voice was rough with emotion. But you're the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. Rory felt her heart stumble. She looked around the ruined chapel. Statues of forgotten saints watched them from the shadows. They were alone in the dark. But as Cale's hand found hers and interlaced their fingers, the ruin felt more like a home than her cottage ever had. She squeezed his hand. The bond hummed at her chest. It was a song of belonging. Rest, Cale, she said softly. I will watch the door. Chapter 11, The Stone Prophecy. Moonlight shifted. It crawled across the floor of the chapel as the night deepened. Rory could not sleep. The adrenaline in her veins was a buzzing hive of bees. She wandered the small sanctuary while Cale breathed deeply in a fitful sleep. She stopped in front of a mural behind the altar. Time had chipped away the paint. Mold obscured the faces. But the central image remained clear. It depicted a massive black wolf. He was chained to a mountain of ice. His eyes were painted with real gold leaf that still shimmered in the gloom. Rory reached out. Her fingertips brushed the cold stone. Beneath the wolf stood a girl. She was small, insignificant against the scale of the beast. But in her hand, she held a key made of light. And where she touched the wolf, the chains were breaking. Rory froze. There was text carved into the stone beneath the image. It was old tongue, but her mother had taught her the basics before the exile. Rory traced the letters. She sounded out the words in her mind. The king falls to the traitor's blade. The prince bears the mark of night. Only the unseen one can break the seal. She who saves the beast once shall save the man twice. Rory stepped back. The air left her lungs. It was not an accident. Meeting the wolf in the woods 12 years ago was not chance. Finding him again was not luck. She was the unseen one. You found it. Cale's voice came from the shadows. He was standing. He leaned heavily against a pew. He looked at the mural with weary familiarity. You knew, Rory whispered. Betrayal tasted like copper in her mouth. She turned to face him. You knew about this prophecy. Cale limped forward. I suspected. The royal seers spoke of a cure for the curse. They said I had to find the one who showed mercy when the world showed teeth. I thought you came back from me, Rory said. Her voice broke. I thought you wanted me, but I'm just a tool. I am just a key to break your chains. No, Cale said sharply. He reached for her. Rory stepped out of reach. The hurt was sudden and blinding. All her life, she had been used. She had been the invisible servant, the background noise. She thought Cale saw her, but he only saw his salvation. I am just the girl who breaks the curse, she said bitterly. Tears stung her eyes. That is all I am to you. Rory, listen to me, Cale pleaded. He took a step, but his leg gave out. He stumbled. I can't, Rory said. The walls of the chapel felt like they were closing in. I can't be used again. She turned toward the heavy oak doors. Panic seized her logic. She needed to breathe. She needed to run. Chapter 12, The Severing. The night air hit Rory like a slap. She sprinted into the graveyard surrounding the chapel. Her boots crunched on dead grass. She did not know where she was going. She just needed distance. She needed to outrun the crushing weight of destiny. She reached the iron gate at the edge of the property. Rory, stop! Cale's shout echoed from the chapel doors. It was raw, desperate. Rory pushed the gate open. It shrieked on rusted hinges. She stepped through. Pain exploded in her chest. It was not the dull ache from before. This was a sledgehammer cracking her sternum. It was the physical tearing of a soul. Rory gasped. Her vision went white. She collapsed onto the gravel road. 50 yards away, inside the chapel doorway, Cale fell to his knees. He roared in agony. The bond was not just a string connecting them. It was an artery. Rory had stretched it too far. She clawed at the dirt. She tried to crawl back, but her limbs would not obey. They felt heavy as lead. The cold seeped into her bones instantly. Her heart fluttered. It was skipping beats. Thump, thump, silence. Cale, she tried to scream. It came out as a wheeze. She rolled on her back. The stars above spun in dizzying circles. They looked like judging eyes. She had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. She thought she was running from being used, but she was running from her own heart. The darkness at the edge of her vision crept inward. It was cold and empty. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard footsteps. Heavy, crunching on gravel. A shadow fell over her. Rory forced her eyes open. She expected to see Cale. She expected her golden-eyed prince to scoop her up and heal the bond. But the face looking down at her was not Cale. It was a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He wore the crest of the obsidian throne. He smiled. It was a smile of sharp teeth and zero mercy. Found you, the stranger said. He lifted a heavy boot. Rory tried to lift her hand. She tried to fight, but the separation sickness had drained her. She was paralyzed. The boot came down. Everything went black. Chapter 13, The Tether of Bone. Consciousness returned to Rory in jagged shards of pain. Her head throbbed in time with her heartbeat. The world was a blur of moving ground and sharp stones digging into her hip. She was being dragged. A rough hand gripped her ankle. The man who had found her was hauling her across the gravel like a sack of grain. He hummed a low, dissonant tune. It was a song of capture, a song of victory. Rory clawed at the dirt. Her fingers found no purchase. The separation sickness sat on her chest like a crushing weight. Every breath was a battle. She was suffocating in the open air because her other half was too far away. Stop struggling, the scout grunted. He did not look back. The king pays double for a live catch. Do not make me have my profit. Rory tried to kick. Her leg felt heavy as iron. The distance from Kale was killing her faster than the scout ever could. Her vision tunneled. Black spots danced at the edges of her sight. Then the air changed. The scout stopped humming. He froze. The birds in nearby trees took flight all at once. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over the clearing. It was not a sound. It was a pressure. A growl vibrated through the soles of Rory's boots. It was deep enough to rattle teeth. The scout dropped her leg. He reached for the sword at his hip. He was too slow. A shadow detached itself from the tree line. Kale slammed into the man with the force of a falling mountain. There was no grace in this attack. It was brute, desperate violence. Bones snapped. The sound was wet and sickening. The scout did not even have time to scream. He was thrown 10 feet and hit a gravestone with a final, heavy thud. Silence rushed back into the graveyard. Kale stood panting over the body. He was in human form, but only barely. His fingers were curled into claws. His canines were fully extended. Dark veins pulsed aggressively against his pale skin. He looked like a demon summoned from the abyss. He turned slowly toward Rory. The moment his eyes locked onto hers, the crushing weight on her chest vanished. Air flooded her lungs. It was sweet and sharp. The bond snapped back into place with a physical jolt that made her gasp. Kale fell to his knees. He crawled toward her. He did not care about dignity. He did not care about being a prince. He only cared about the terrifying distance between them. He reached her. His hands were shaking as he grabbed her shoulders. He hauled her up and crushed her against his chest. "You ran," he rasped into her hair. His voice was broken glass. "You ran from me." Rory clung to him. She buried her face in the crook of his neck. The scent of him, blood and pine and ozone, was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. She sobbed. "I thought I was saving you," she cried. "I thought if I left, the prophecy would break." Kale pulled back. He cupped her face in his blood-stained hands. His golden eyes were wide and terrified. "You are the prophecy," he swore. "You're the only thing that keeps the monster at bay. Never run again. Promise me." Rory looked at the desperation etched into his features. She saw the truth. He was not using her. He was drowning, and she was his only heir. "I promise," she whispered. Chapter 14. Red Water Rising. They did not stop moving. The moon hung high and white above the tree line, a silent witness to their flight. Kale led them toward the river. The rushing water would hide their scent. It was their only chance to shake the rest of Ryden's hunting party. The riverbank was steep. Black water churned over jagged rocks. The spray was freezing. It coated their skin in a layer of ice. "We cross here," Kale shouted over the roar of the current. He pointed to a narrow ford where stones broke the surface. Rory nodded. She was exhausted. Her legs burned with every step, but the bond was humming strong now. It lent her Kale's strength. She could feel his stamina pouring into her like fuel. They stepped onto the first slick rock. An arrow hissed through the air. It struck the stone inches from Rory's foot. Sparks flew. "Ambush!" Kale roared. He shoved Rory down behind a boulder. 6 figures emerged from the reeds on the opposite bank. They were not ordinary scouts. They wore the black steel armor of the Obsidian Guard. They moved with synchronized lethality. "Kill the girl," the leader commanded. His voice carried over the water. "The prince is to be taken alive." 3 guards leaped onto the stones. They moved with supernatural speed. Shifters. Kale did not wait. He vaulted over the boulder. He met them in the middle of the river. The water turned white with violence. Kale fought like a man possessed. He caught the first guard's blade with his bare forearm. He ignored the slice of steel. He punched the man in the throat, sending him tumbling into the dark current. Rory watched from her cover. Terror gripped her throat. Kale was bleeding. The curse was slowing him down. His movements were just a fraction too slow. A second guard flanked him. He raised a heavy mace, aiming for Kale's knee. "Behind you!" Rory screamed. She did not think. She did not plan. She grabbed a fist-sized river stone and hurled it. Her aim was true. The rock struck the guard in the temple. It wasn't enough to kill him, but it was enough to make him flinch. Kale used the distraction. He spun, grabbing the guard by the breastplate, and threw him into the deep water. But the third guard had closed the distance to Rory. She scrambled back. The man loomed over her. He raised his sword. The steel glinted in the moonlight. No, Cale bellowed. He couldn't reach her in time. He did the only thing he could. He threw himself into the path of the magic. He opened the bond fully. He took her terror and gave her his rage. Rory felt the surge of power. It was hot and intoxicating. She didn't cower. She rolled to the side, dodging the blade by a hair. Cale crashed into the attacker a second later. He drove the man into the mud. He didn't stop hitting until the guards stopped moving. Silence returned, broken only by the rushing water. Cale stood up. He swayed. Blood poured from a fresh wound on his side. He looked at Rory. His eyes were losing their gold. They were turning black. The curse was taking over. "We have to go," he slurred. "More will come." Chapter 15. The Wolf's Bargain. They found shelter in a shallow cave hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss. It was damp and cold, but it was hidden. Cale collapsed the moment they were inside. He hit the dirt floor hard. Rory rushed to him. She turned him over. The sight made her stomach lurch. The black veins had spread. They now covered half his chest and were creeping up his neck toward his jaw. His skin was burning hot to the touch. "Cale," she whispered. She ripped the hem of her dress again. She needed to bind the wound. "Stay with me." He gripped her wrist. His strength was fading. "Leave me, Rory. I am finished. The curse, it feeds on the violence. I used too much power. I am not leaving," Rory said fiercely. She pressed the cloth to his side. "I promised. You will die if you stay," Cale wheezed. "Ryden will burn this forest to ash to find me. You must run while the moon is dark." Rory looked down at him. This was the prince of the realm, the lethal monster, and he was begging her to save herself. She realized something then. He had spent his entire life being the shield, being the weapon. No one had ever fought for him. "No," she said. The word was solid, unshakable. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "I am done running," she declared. Her voice echoed in the small cave. "I am done being the victim. You chose me, Cale. You came back for me. Now I am choosing you." Cale stared at her. The blackness in his eyes receded just an inch. The gold flickered back to life. "Rory," he breathed. It was a prayer. "We're going to fight," she said. "We're going to break this curse. And then we're going to take back your throne." "How?" Cale asked. "We are alone. We have no army. No allies." Rory's mind raced. She remembered a name. A rumor whispered in the village tavern years ago. A man who hated Ryden almost as much as Cale did. It was a risk. It was a gamble with their lives. But it was the only card they had left to play. "We might have one ally," she said slowly. "But he is dangerous." "Who?" "General Vane," Rory said. "The man Ryden exiled to the Deadlands." Cale's eyes widened. "Vane is a butcher. He would sell us for a pouch of coin. Or," Rory said, tightening the bandage, "he might help us kill the king who took everything from him." She stood up. She wiped the blood from her hands onto her dress. She looked out at the dark forest. She was not the same girl who had gathered herbs yesterday. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman with a wolf's heart. "Can you walk?" she asked. Cale gritted his teeth. He forced himself to sit up. Pain radiated from him in waves, but he nodded. "Then let's go," Rory said. "We have a war to start." Chapter 16. The Judas Coin. The Deadlands lived up to their name. The earth here was scorched black and refused to grow anything green. Twisted trees clawed at the gray sky like skeletal fingers begging for rain. Rory supported Cale's weight as they stumbled toward the crumbling fortress on the horizon. General Vane's stronghold was a ruin of jagged stone and rusted iron. It smelled of sulfur and old blood. Cale stumbled. His breathing was ragged and wet. The black veins of the curse had reached his jawline. They pulsed with a sickening rhythm that matched the throbbing in Rory's own chest. "Almost there," Rory grunted. She shifted his arm across her shoulders. Her muscles screamed in protest. "Vane will help us." "He has to." Cale did not answer. He was focusing every ounce of his will on putting one foot in front of the other. They reached the heavy iron gates. A guard in mismatched armor peered down from the battlements. Rory shouted Vane's name. She shouted the secret code Cale had whispered to her miles back. The gates groaned open. Hope, fragile and desperate, fluttered in Rory's chest. They limped into the courtyard. Dozens of hardened mercenaries stopped sharpening their blades to stare. They looked like wolves who had been starving for a long winter. General Vane emerged from the keep. He was a mountain of a man with a beard like steel wool and eyes that held zero warmth. He looked at Cale's broken form. He looked at Rory. The prodigal prince, Vane boomed. His voice sounded like rocks tumbling down a cliff. And a human girl. You look terrible, boy. We need sanctuary. Rory stepped forward. She tried to make her voice sound royal. She tried to channel the queen she wasn't. We need your sword against Raiden. Vane laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. He descended the stone steps. He stopped inches from Cale. He sniffed the air. I smell death on you, Vane observed. And I smell a bounty. Rory's blood ran cold. She stepped back. You hate the king. You were exiled. I was. Vane agreed. He signaled to the men surrounding them. But gold has a way of soothing old wounds. And Raiden pays very well for traitors. The betrayal hit Rory harder than a physical blow. She had dragged Cale here. She had promised him safety. She had led him straight into the butcher's shop. Run, Cale snarled. He pushed Rory away. He summoned the last of his strength. He bared his teeth and shifted partially. Claws erupted from his fingers. It was not enough. Nets weighted with iron balls flew through the air. They crashed down on Cale. He roared in fury and pain. The iron burned his cursed skin. He fell to his knees. Rory lunged for a discarded sword. A heavy boot kicked her in the ribs. She gasped. The air left her lungs. Rough hands grabbed her arms and pinned her to the dirt. Vane stood over Cale. He spat on the ground. Lock them in the lower cells. And send a raven to the king. Tell him dinner is served. Chapter 17. Cage of Iron and Ash. The dungeon was a pit of despair carved deep into the earth. Water dripped from the ceiling with maddening slowness. Plink, plink, plink. The sound echoed against the stone walls like a ticking clock, counting down their remaining minutes. Rory was thrown into a cell on the left. Cale was dragged into the one opposite her. Heavy iron bars separated them. Cale! Rory screamed. She gripped the cold metal until her skin tore. He did not answer. He hung from shackles on the wall. His head hung low. The curse was eating him alive. The black poison was visible even in the dim torchlight. It turned his veins into rivers of ink. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. They were slow, deliberate, expensive boots hitting wet stone. Prince Raiden stepped into the light. He looked exactly like Cale, but wrong. Where Cale was rugged, Raiden was polished. Where Cale was gold, Raiden was ice. He wore a velvet coat the color of midnight and a crown of twisted silver. Hello, brother, Raiden purred. He stopped in front of Cale's cell. You look unwell. Cale lifted his head. His eyes were dim. You will rot for this. Raiden chuckled. He pulled a key from his pocket. He unlocked the cell door and stepped inside. He circled Cale like a shark circling a bleeding seal. I'm not the one rotting, Raiden said. He reached out and pressed a thumb hard into Cale's cursed wound. Cale screamed. It was a sound that tore Rory's soul in half. Stop it, Rory shrieked. She shook the bars. Leave him alone. Take me instead. Raiden turned slowly. He looked at Rory as if she were a cockroach on his boot. He walked over to her cell. He stood so close she could smell his cologne. It smelled of lavender and cruelty. You, Raiden sneered. The little human savior. Do you know what you have done to him? I tried to save him, Rory spat. You killed him, Raiden corrected. His voice was silky and venomous. The bond between a wolf and a human is rare for a reason. It requires strength. You are weak. You are draining him. Every beat of your heart steals life from his. Rory froze. The accusation hit her target. Look at him, Raiden commanded. He pointed at Cale. He is dying because he tied his soul to a broken thing like you. Rory looked. Cale was pale as death. His chest barely moved. I'm doing him a kindness, Raiden whispered. I'm going to kill you at dawn. And when you die, the bond breaks. He might survive the loss. He will be broken, yes, but he will be alive. And he will be mine. Raiden turned and walked away. His laughter trailed behind him. Enjoy your last night together. Chapter 18. The Whisper in the Dark. The torch sputtered and died. Total darkness swallowed the dungeon. The only sound was Cale's ragged breathing across the corridor. Rory sat huddled against the bars. She was numb. Ryden's words played on a loop in her mind. You're killing him. You're the anchor. She had wanted so badly to be the hero. She had wanted to be worthy. But maybe the most worthy thing she could do was let go. Rory. Kale's voice floated across the dark. It was barely a whisper. I am here, she choked out. Tears streamed down her face. They felt cold on her skin. Do not listen to him, Kale rasped. He lies. Does he? Rory asked. You are dying, Kale. You are weaker than you have ever been. And it is because of me. No, Kale said. I am weak because I fought it. I fought the bond. I fought the love. A long silence stretched between them. The air grew heavy. The temperature dropped. Rory, Kale said again. His voice was different this time. Clarity cut through the pain. I need you to do something for me. Anything, she promised. When they come for you at dawn, Kale said, I want you to reject me. Rory stopped breathing. What? If you reject the bond, Kale explained, his voice breaking. If you say the words and mean them, the tie will sever. You will be free of the curse. You will be just a human girl again. Ryden will have no reason to kill you. It will kill you, Rory whispered in horror. Rejection was a death sentence for a bonded wolf. I'm already dead, Kale said. Save yourself, Rory. Please, be the one who survives. He was choosing her. Even now, in the dark, in the end, he was trying to sacrifice his soul to keep her heart beating. Something inside Rory fractured. The part of her that was the scared apothecary girl shattered into dust. The part of her that believed she was unworthy disintegrated. She stood up in the darkness. Her hands gripped the cold iron bars. No, she said. Rory. No, she shouted. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. I will not reject you. I will not leave you. If we die together. But I am not letting you go. A strange heat began to bloom in her chest. It wasn't the soft warmth of the bond. It was a fire. It was a sun going supernova. I'm not a victim, Rory declared to the darkness. And I am not weak. She closed her eyes. She reached down into the deepest part of her soul. She found the thread that connected her to Kale. It was frayed. It was thin. She grabbed it with her mind, and she pulled. She poured every ounce of her rage, her love, and her defiance into that connection. She didn't take strength from him. She gave it. Across the hall, Kale gasped. A soft, silver light began to glow around Rory's hands. It wasn't magic. It was pure, unadulterated will. The prophecy wasn't about magic. It was about a choice. And Rory had finally made hers. Chapter 19. The Sun at Midnight. The dungeon did not shake. The earth did not tremble. The change was silent. It was the silence of a star igniting in a vacuum. Rory stood in the center of her cell. Her eyes were open, but she saw nothing of the damp stone walls or the rusted iron bars. She saw only the golden thread connecting her heart to the man across the hall. It was frayed. It was dying. She seized it with her mind. Ryden had called her a parasite. He claimed she was draining Kale. He was wrong. She was not the drain. She was the battery. Rory inhaled. The air in the dungeon grew instantly hot. It tasted of ozone and lightning storms. She pushed. She did not push with muscles. She pushed with her soul. She sent a surge of pure, defiant life forced down that golden wire. Live, she commanded. Across the corridor, Kale's body arched off the stone floor. His back bowed. A sound tore from his throat. It was not a scream of pain. It was a roar of power returning. The black veins on his neck stopped pulsing. They froze. Then they began to retreat. The ink vanished as if burned away by invisible fire. His skin flushed with color. The wound on his shoulder knit together before her eyes. Flesh reconnected. Scars faded. Rory felt the feedback loop snap into place. She gave him strength. He gave her stability. The bond roared to life. It was a choir of angels screaming for war. She looked at her hands. They glowed with a soft, terrifying silver light. She reached out and touched the lock of her cell door. The iron hissed. It turned red, then white. The metal groaned in protest against the supernatural heat. The locking mechanism melted into slag. The heavy door swung open with a shriek of yielding metal. Rory stepped into the corridor. She felt 10 feet tall. She felt like a queen. She walked to Kale's cell. He was already standing. He gripped the bars. His knuckles were white. His eyes were blazing gold, brighter than she had ever seen them. There was no sickness in him now. There was only the predator. "You," Cale breathed. He looked at her as if she were a deity he had forgotten how to worship. Rory didn't speak. She didn't need words. She touched his lock. The heat flared again. The iron gave way. Cale kicked the door open. It slammed against the stone wall. He stepped out. He towered over her. The air between them crackled with static electricity. He reached for her. His hands were desperate. He ran them over her arms, her face, her hair. He needed to confirm she was real. "You broke it," he said. His voice was thick with awe. "You broke the seal." "Les choses Rory corrected." Her voice was steady. "I chose us." Footsteps thundered down the stairs. The guard were coming. They had seen the light. Cale turned toward the sound. A dark, feral grin spread across his face. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had been caged too long. "Stay behind me," he said. "No," Rory said. She stepped up beside him. She took his hand. Her skin still hummed with that strange, silver power. "Beside you." Cale looked at her. Respect warred with protective instinct in his gaze. Respect won. He squeezed her fingers. "Beside me," he agreed. "Let's burn this place to the ground." Chapter 20. The Teeth of the Rebellion. The first guard turned the corner at the bottom of the stairs. He held a torch in one hand and a sword in the other. He saw Cale and stopped dead. The prince was not the broken, dying thing they had dragged in hours ago. He was a nightmare. The shadows seemed to cling to him, wrapping around his shoulders like a cloak of smoke. "Raise the alarm," the guard shouted. He dropped the torch and fumbled for the horn at his belt. He never reached it. Cale moved. He was a blur of motion. He covered the distance in a single heartbeat. He didn't bother to shift. He didn't need claws. He punched the guard in the chest. The breastplate crumpled like paper. The man flew backward and hit the stone steps with a bone-shattering crunch. "Get his keys," Rory ordered. She was already moving toward the other cells. The dungeon was full of prisoners. Men and women who had defied Raiden. Wolves who refused to bow to a false king. They pressed their faces against the bars. They watched Rory with wide, fearful eyes. She didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like the personification of judgment. Rory grabbed the key ring from the unconscious guard's belt. She moved down the row. Click, clang. Door after door swung open. "If you want to live," Rory shouted, her voice echoing off the damp walls, "you fight. If you want freedom, you take it." A massive man with a scar running down his nose stepped out of cell 4. He looked at Cale. He knelt on one knee. "My king," the man rumbled. "Stand up," Cale commanded. "I do not need servants. I need warriors. Raiden is upstairs. Vane is upstairs. They think we are meat." A low growl ripped through the gathered prisoners. They were weak. They were starving. But the sight of their true alpha standing tall and uncursed ignited a spark in their blood. Rory felt the shift in the room. It was a tide turning. "There's an armory on the second level," Cale told them. "Take whatever you can find. Kill anyone who stands in your way." He turned to Rory. The violence in his eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Are you ready?" Rory looked at the stairs. Up there was General Vane. Up there was Raiden. Up there was death. She reached down and picked up the fallen guard's sword. It was heavy. It was clumsy in her hand, but it felt right. "I am ready," she said. They charged up the stairs. A tide of angry wolves followed them. The sound of their boots on the stone was the drumbeat of war. They burst into the courtyard level. Chaos erupted. Vane's mercenaries were caught off guard. They scrambled for weapons. Cale shifted. It was fluid. It was terrifying. One moment he was a man. The next he was the massive black beast of legend. He roared. The sound shattered windows. It paralyzed the human guards with primal fear. The black wolf tore into the enemy lines. He was a hurricane of teeth and claws. He tossed armored men aside like ragdolls. Rory stayed close to his flank. She was not a soldier. She had no training, but she had the bond. She could feel where the attacks were coming from before they happened. Left. She swung the heavy sword. She caught a mercenary in the arm just as he raised a spear. He screamed and dropped his weapon. Behind. She spun. She drove the pommel of the sword into the face of a man trying to flank the wolf. They moved as one organism. Wolf and girl. Shadow and light. General Vane appeared on the balcony above the courtyard. His face went pale. He saw his men falling. He saw the prisoners rising. And he saw the girl he had dismissed as weak leading the charge. "Kill them all," Vane screamed. "Bring me their heads." Cale looked up. He snarled. He crouched, muscles coiling for a leap that seemed impossible. Chapter 21. The Girl Who Walked Through Fire. The great doors to the throne room were barred from the inside. Wood splintered as Cale slammed his massive shoulder against them. Once, twice. On the third hit, the oak shattered. Rory stepped through the debris first. The throne room was vast. Banners of crimson and black hung from the rafters. At the far end, sitting on a throne of jagged obsidian, sat Ryden. He looked bored. He swirled a goblet of wine in his hand. General Vane stood by his side, looking considerably less relaxed. His sword was drawn. His eyes darted between Cale and the exits. Cale shifted back to human form. He stood naked and bloody in the center of the hall. He did not look vulnerable. He looked like a god of war carved from marble. "Brother," Ryden said. He took a sip of wine. "You are persistent. I suppose I should have killed the girl immediately." "You should have," Cale agreed. His voice was a low rumble. "But you were too arrogant. You thought she was a weakness. Is she not?" Ryden stood up. He descended the dais steps. He drew a sword that glowed with a sickly purple light. "A cursed blade. She is human. She is fragile. One strike and she breaks." Ryden moved. He was fast, faster than Cale in his current state. He lunged, the cursed blade aiming straight for Cale's heart. Cale tried to dodge. He was a fraction of a second too slow. Rory did not think. She did not hesitate. She stepped in front of Cale. "No." Cale roared. Ryden smiled. He didn't check his swing. He wanted to kill her. He wanted to watch Cale break. The purple blade descended. Rory raised her hand. She didn't raise the sword. She raised her palm. "Stop," she said. The silver light exploded from her skin. It was blinding. It hit the cursed sword like a physical wall. Clang. The sound was deafening. The blade rebounded. Ryden stumbled back, shock written across his features. The purple magic in his sword shattered. The steel turned gray and dull. Rory stood her ground. She was trembling, but she did not lower her hand. The prophecy hummed in her blood. "She who saves the beast." "You do not get to touch him," Rory said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the silent hall. "You do not get to hurt him. Not anymore." Ryden stared at her. "What are you?" "I am the answer," Rory said. "And I am your end." She looked at Cale. He was staring at her back. He looked terrified and amazed. "Finish it, Cale," she whispered. Cale looked from her to his brother. The hesitation vanished. The guilt vanished. He stepped around her. "You wanted to fight for the crown," Cale said to Ryden. He cracked his neck. "Let us fight." Ryden snarled. He threw the useless sword aside and shifted. A gray wolf, sleek and fast, took his place. Cale shifted. The black wolf returned. The two brothers circled each other. The air was thick with the promise of violence. Rory backed away toward the wall. She kept her eyes on Vane. The general was edging toward a side door. He saw the way the wind was blowing. He was a rat looking for a sinking ship's exit. Rory hefted her sword. She blocked his path. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Vane sneered. He raised his heavy broadsword. "On my way, girl. I do not have time for games." "Good," Rory said. She tightened her grip. "Because I'm not playing." Behind her, the two wolves collided with a sound like thunder. The final battle had begun, and Rory was right in the middle of the fire. Chapter 22. The Obsidian Throne Shatters. The throne room became a slaughterhouse. Dust rained from the high ceiling as the two massive wolves collided. It was a tangle of gray and black fur, a blur of teeth and claws that moved faster than the human eye could track. Rory ducked. General Vane's broadsword cleaved the air where her head had been a second before. The steel sparked against the stone pillar behind her. Vane grunted with effort. He was strong, but he was slow. He fought like a man, used to crushing weaker opponents. Rory was not strong, but she had spent a lifetime dodging blows. She had spent 20 years making herself small to survive. Now she used that smallness as a weapon. She rolled between his legs. She slashed the guard's sword across the back of his knee. The blade bit deep into the gap in his armor. Vane roared. His leg buckled. He crashed to one knee. Rory scrambled up. She didn't wait for him to recover. She raised the hilt of her sword and brought it down on his temple with both hands. The general collapsed face first onto the marble floor. He did not move. Rory gasped for air. She turned toward the center of the room. Cale was losing. Ryden was fresh. He had not spent weeks starving in a dungeon. He had not been drained by a curse. The gray wolf had Cale pinned. Ryden's jaws were clamped around Cale's throat. He shook his head violently. He was trying to snap Cale's spine. No, Rory screamed. She felt the pain in her own neck. The bond transmitted the sensation of choking. She stumbled forward. She didn't have a weapon. She had dropped the sword. She only had the light. Rory reached out with her mind. She grabbed the bond. She didn't just pull this time. She flooded it. She took every ounce of her fear and turned it into white-hot aggression. Kill him, she commanded through the link. Get up and end him. Cale's eyes snapped open. The gold irises flared with sudden, terrifying luminosity. He did not struggle against Ryden's grip. He exploded out of it. The black wolf surged upward with impossible strength. He threw Ryden off. The gray wolf skidded across the floor, claws screeching on the stone. Cale didn't pause. He lunged. He was a black arrow shot from a divine bow. He caught Ryden midair. His jaws closed around his brother's neck. There was a sickening crack. Ryden went limp. He fell to the floor, a heap of gray fur and broken ambition. The silence that followed was absolute. Cale stood over the body. He was heaving. Blood dripped from his muzzle. He threw his head back and howled. It was a sound of victory. It was a sound of mourning. Then the air shimmered. The black wolf dissolved. Cale stood there in human form. He was covered in wounds, but they were already closing. The curse was gone. The black veins had vanished completely. He looked at Rory. He didn't smile. He walked toward her. He walked over the body of the king. He walked over the unconscious general. He stopped inches from her. He fell to his knees. He wrapped his arms around her waist and buried his face in her stomach. He shook. Rory placed her hands on his head. She tangled her fingers in his dark hair. She held him while he wept for the brother he had lost and the freedom he had found. Chapter 23. The Queen of Scars. The heavy oak doors creaked open. The sound echoed in the silent cavern of the throne room. Rory looked up. Dozens of people stood in the entryway. The prisoners from the dungeon. The mercenaries who had thrown down their weapons. The palace staff who had hidden during the fighting. They stared at the scene. The dead king. The fallen general. And the naked prince kneeling before a girl in a torn dress. Cale stood up. He did not care about his nudity. He radiated a power that made clothes irrelevant. He turned to face the crowd. His face was hard. His eyes were dry now. He was every inch the alpha. Ryden is dead, Cale announced. His voice carried to the back of the room without effort. The usurpation is over. A murmur went through the crowd. Some looked relieved. Others looked terrified. They waited for the purge. They waited for the new king to demand blood. Cale turned back to Rory. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was iron. He pulled her forward until she was standing beside him. Look at her, Cale commanded the room. The crowd shifted their gaze to Rory. She wanted to shrink. She wanted to hide behind him. But the bond hummed in her chest. It told her to stand tall. You called her a traitor's daughter, Cale said. His voice was low and dangerous. You called her weak. You left her to rot in the apothecary while you bowed to a murderer. He squeezed Rory's hand. This girl walked through fire for me, Cale declared. She broke the curse that 10 sorcerers could not touch. She saved your king when he could not save himself. He looked at the massive man from the dungeon, the one with the scar. Kneel, Cale said softly. The man dropped to both knees. But he wasn't looking at Cale. He was looking at Rory. To her, Cale clarified. Rory gasped. Cale, no, you are the king. And you are the reason I am breathing, Cale whispered to her. Let them see you, Rory. Let them choose you. One by one, the wolves in the room dropped to their knees. The mercenaries followed. The servants bowed their heads. Rory looked out at the sea of bowed heads. For 20 years, she had been invisible. She had been the dust beneath their boots. Now, she was the only thing standing. She looked at Cale. He was watching her with a look of such intense pride it made her knees weak. He wasn't looking at a savior. He was looking at his equal. I choose you, she whispered to him. I know, Cale smiled. It was a real smile this time, breathtaking and bright. Now let's go home. Chapter 24, The Final Claim. The moon was high and full. It flooded the royal bedchamber with silver light. The room was vast, filled with silk and velvet, but Rory only had eyes for the man standing on the balcony. Cale had bathed. He wore loose linen trousers. His chest was bare. The skin was smooth. The terrible black map of the curse was gone. Only white scars remained, badges of survival. Rory stepped out onto the stone terrace. The night air was cool, but she felt warm. She always felt warm near him now. The bond was a steady, comforting furnace in her core. Cale turned. He held 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her. To the future, he said. To the present, Rory corrected. She took a sip. I like the present. It has less running. Cale chuckled. He set his glass down on the stone railing. He reached out and pulled her against him. His body was solid. Real. I have one more promise to keep, he said. His voice dropped. It became husky. Rory looked up at him. Which one? The claim, Cale said. The final step of the bond. The mark. Rory's heart stuttered. She knew what he meant. The bite. The permanent tether that would bind their souls together for eternity. It was the ultimate act of trust. Are you sure? She asked. The old insecurity reared its head one last time. I'm just Rory. I'm not a noble. I don't know how to be a queen. Cale cupped her face. He ran his thumbs over her cheekbones. You are not just Rory, he said fiercely. You are the woman who stared down a king. You are the woman who refused to let me die in the dark. I do not want a noble. I want you. He leaned down. He brushed his lips against the sensitive skin where her neck met her shoulder. Rory shivered. She tilted her head back. She bared her throat to the wolf. Do it, she whispered. Claim me. Cale didn't hesitate. He sank his teeth into her skin. It didn't hurt. It felt like a lightning strike. A rush of pure, golden power flooded Rory's veins. She gasped. Her soul expanded. She felt him. She felt his love, his fear, his hope. She felt the exact shape of his soul fitting into hers. It was perfect. Cale pulled back. He licked the mark to seal it. He looked into her eyes. His pupils were blown wide. Mine, he growled. Yours, Rory agreed. She reached up and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a claim of her own. She had spent her life wondering if she was worthy of being chosen. She finally knew the answer. She didn't need to be chosen. She had chosen herself. And in doing so, she had won the world. Rory pulled the king back into the room and closed the balcony doors. The long night was over. Their dawn had just begun.